This is the Perfect RIA, in case you didn't know. Bringing you all the strategies to help your business grow. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? Sit back and listen in while you feel the beat, yeah.
Stop it. Just stop it. And you will be successful. No, seriously, just stop it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. I'm your co-host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me, as usual, the man, the myth, the legend, Micah Shalansky. Micah, how are you, my friend?
Jarvis, it is another beautiful day in Alaska. How could I possibly complain? And we get to talk about something pretty fun, which is just stop it, knock it off, and just work. And it's this kind of something that kind of comes into so many different aspects of our life, but it's fun to chat about.
Yeah, it really is, and maybe this is an indication of our respective ages that this seems to repeat itself. Like now, I'm hearing myself say things that my mentor said to me more than a few years ago, and at that point, I thought, no. What you don't understand is that seminar marketing is a new thing, right? Like direct mail marketing is a new thing, internet marketing is a new thing. There was always like, you wouldn't believe this new thing, and they would say, stop it, just smile and dial. Just call the people. Just go out and see people. No. What I need to do is I need new brochures. That will solve my problems.
And it's amazing, all those things that we look into. And, we get categorized, this is all stop playing office. But really what we want to do is categorize it. What are 7 things that you need to stop doing that's holding you back from success, right? You stop doing these 7 things, you will be more successful. And that's kind of this key between it. And so sometimes it's really easy to talk about, hey, all the things that we need to do, which are fantastic. But Jarvis, as you know, as we grow, as our practices build and all these things happen, we have to get better at saying no to activities and no to things. And that's one of the things that you and I kind of bat around a lot is you and I get a lot of opportunities and we love to say yes, right?
Yeah,
Number one, we like to help people. We love to say yes. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is a great opportunity. I so got to seize it. But with every opportunity I'm seizing, I'm not giving my attention to something else. And while I don't like that lack mentality, at some point it does become a reality with your resources, the current way it's designed. What do you need to put the most attention to in order to help it grow? And if you're saying yes to everything, you're not building up your no muscles. And you got to build up your no muscles. You got to build up those stop muscles. That is your discipline, which is coming in and saying, no, I have to stop doing A, B, and C because it's not productive. And those stop muscles also have to be really good in looking at data and making educated decisions with data. And that's so important.
Yeah, it's important to remember, Mike, along those lines, that every time we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else. And the question is, are we being intentional with that no? Right? So if I'm saying, yes, I want to play around on ChatGPT, and that means I'm saying no to calling centers of influence, I have a big problem. Now, if I intentionally said, hey, listen, instead of watching Netflix every week, I'm going to spend that time learning ChatGPT. Okay, you've made an intentional no that might be a more productive use of time. But to your point, we've got to practice saying no intentionally because every time we say yes, we're saying no to something else. It's just, are we being intentional or not?
Yeah, that's a really big thing we have to keep watching. And also, this is how we lead our team, right? What example are we setting for our kids, for our spouses, for our team members as well? And if we're not getting our things done because we're not saying no enough, that's going to cause into other issues. So Jarvis, let's kick this thing off. And what's the first thing people have to stop doing in order to be successful in their practice?
Yeah, and I want to just highlight real quick that this isn't like some list that we came up with just because we thought this was fun, right? This is from your practice, from my practice, from the now 100 plus advisors we've taken through extreme accountability and seen all their numbers. So this isn't just like hey, you know what would be fun is a list of 7. These are real things that we see all the time. So number one thing you need to stop doing, you need to stop dreaming about prospects. We talked about this a few weeks ago that you will ask an advisor, hey, how many prospects have you seen this year? I'm sure I've seen 47. 47, really? Write down their names. And we get to 2 names and it stops. That's the end of the thing. And we spend this time dreaming about prospects and not actually seeing the prospects. So the first thing you need to do is stop dreaming about prospects and really look and say, what are the levers I can pull every single week, every single day if need be, that will get me to seeing prospects? Is that centers of influence? Is that content from my website? What is it and what can I actually track versus just dream about?
Yeah, and that's just what I was going to highlight right there, Jarvis, what you just said. Stop what you are dreaming about versus what you can track, right? Tracking makes it so evident. So we just changed a system in our office, and I can't wait to debrief about it later on the podcast. And I haven't got it flushed out yet, so I want to give you kind of the good pros and cons when we go through this. I'm still working on it. But anyways, it was a streamlined way of getting prospects data into our system. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. And we loved it. The team loved it, etc. So we implemented it out, and we've seen a massive drop in the amount of data that we have from clients coming in. We're like, holy crap, we made it easier, but apparently not. And so now we're still testing this and we're still running it out. Then I'll give you guys all the details on it. But this is an area that we thought we had something really cool figured out that was going to be so helpful. But one of the things we did at the very beginning is that I want to track all of this. I want all of the data on the last 24 months on our prospects and the data we've had. Then we rolled this new system out. It was like, great, how are we adhering to that? That's the benchmark. That was success, right? If we hadn't changed anything, that would have kept going, right? And so now we changed something. It must be above this benchmark to justify the work and the cost that we've put into this. And so that's how we're tracking this. Now, emotionally, I think this is a brilliant idea. I think it's amazing. It's going to streamline so much of our work. But if I don't get the data from my clients, I don't have prospects coming in. It doesn't matter how much of my work it streamlines, right? I've broken something in that process. But the reason we can evaluate it, and when I brought it up to the team and we could have a civilized conversation about it, not getting emotional because it's their work product they've created, it's just data, right? And I'm not saying their work was bad. I'm just saying our client market right now doesn't seem that they care about it. So we need to pivot and do something else. But it's because we had data.
Yeah, it really is rely on the data. And so that's really to stop dreaming about prospects. Stop focusing on what you think will work. Focus on what actually works. And Micah, to your point, you've got to measure that. So Micah, what would be the second thing that advisors need to stop doing if they want to get to success? By the way, when we're talking about success, like we're not talking about, hey, if you want to make $12 more or you want to see one more fee-only client. We're talking about like, hey, if you want to crush it out of the park and deliver massive value. So what's the second thing advisors need to stop doing?
Number 2, stop getting alerts on your phone and computer. For the love of Pete, turn the damn things off. We are so addicted to those dopamine hits, Jarvis. It's insane. But so many studies have come out. We've talked about them many times. They keep coming out that it absolutely crushes your productivity. And it's rude. Just to be clear. So let's date this a little bit. Let's go back and say, hey, if I walk down a public street with a boom box over my shoulder, blaring music, right? Remember when those days used to happen? What did your mother say about that? Was that person nice or was that person rude? Right? That person was rude, right? They were really setting the tone that they didn't care about anyone else. And that's what alerts do. Alerts set the tone that you don't care about anyone else, that you are solely focused on you and the messages that you're getting. Now, I will put some caveats in here. For example, calendar alerts, because that's going to lead into something else we're going to say in a second. So in some aspects, alerts can be good, but random alerts that don't matter are an issue. Like my hairstylist, I went in to get a haircut and he got an alert on his watch. And so he stopped cutting my hair. He looked down at his watch. I was like, hey, was that a tip on how to cut my hair? And he was like, no. I was like, well, dude, you got a knife on my head. Why don't you pay attention to this versus looking at your phone? He's like, oh my God, I got you, man. And he put that away and he started going back to cutting my hair. But it's little things like that that's so unprofessional to get these alerts, whether it takes away from time with your family, whether it takes away from time with a client, whether it distracts your other team members and things going on. If you work together and someone else's computer's going off, even though it's not your alert, it's still distracting you, and you got to stop that.
Oh, you totally do. And it's you mentioned it, interrupting you from a client, like the idea of an alert going off in a client meeting makes me nauseous, but yes. I'm sure it's happening because we talk to advisors, we're in meetings with them and their alerts are going off. And again, you can say, oh, this is just Matt and Micah being old school, but it's not. Again, all the science is there. And I want to add this, we'll add this towards the bottom of our list. It's one of our numbers at the bottom. You can tell yourself, hey, this doesn't matter. But find me top producers, find me advisors that are delivering massive value, that their lives are bombarded with alerts. If you can find them, I'll show them how to double their practice. Otherwise, you can't find them, right? This is so destructive to your productivity, and it feels like it's nothing, and it's everything. All right, stop. Number 3. Boy, this probably should have been number 1, Micah.
It really should have.
Number 3, stop being late. Stop being late. If you can't be on time for a meeting, cancel the meeting. Cancel the meeting. If a meeting is not important enough for you to show up 5 minutes early, ready to rock and roll, don't go to the meeting. Just cancel it. Client meeting, team meeting, whatever it is, just don't go. If it's not that important, don't go.
And this is the rule, right? If you need to be ready for that meeting 5 minutes in advance, if it's a virtual meeting, and 15 minutes if it's in person, you should be fully ready to go for that meeting. That it needs to start for any reason early, you are ready. And if you cannot meet those standards, you are making poor decisions with your life. At the end of the day, that's what it comes to. Being late, I cannot believe how many people we're talking more, and they're having this latency issue, this late issue, is it's extremely rude to you, to all of your team members. Now, most people aren't empowered enough, brave enough to call you out on it to your face, right? I don't want to say they're scared, but they're trying to be polite. And when sometimes we try to be overly polite, we're robbing someone of a very valuable experience. And this is it. You got to call people out. If we have a team meeting and someone's late, I'm calling them out on it. Then we're having a private call after with the integrator and them to chit chat about this on why were you late? It is insanely rude to the team. Do you not know how to read a calendar? Do you not know how to read your watch? Do you not know how these things work, right? Because if you're late to team meetings, what else are you going to be late to? You're going to be late to a client meeting. Now, if you're late to a client meeting and you're running a surge schedule, okay, then does that mean you have to end your client meeting early? Do you still go your hour? Like, how does all that work? And it creates this nightmare of effects, but it really shows how undisciplined you are in very basic manners.
Yeah, I was just going to highlight that. It really comes down to a lack of discipline, right? It's very rude. It's very rude. And that's I guess that's an external focus. Internally, it shows a lack of discipline. If you're not able to meet this discipline thing, just like we talked about a minute ago, if you're not able to say no to things intentionally, you're saying no to everything accidentally. If you're not disciplined enough to show up to a meeting on time, then you're not disciplined to do what it takes to get to the top of the profession. And you can just decide, you say, hey, I want to have a mediocre practice and a mediocre life. There's a couple other podcasts I can recommend. You can go listen to those. If you're saying, hey, I want to deliver massive value, discipline is essential. In fact, people that push back on surge and they say, hey, I can't handle surge, it's too much, really boils down to a lack of discipline. They just don't have the discipline. Excuse me. They have not yet developed the discipline. It's a muscle like everything else.
You know, Jarvis, one more thing on the being late. This also includes ending your meetings on time, right? This is about meetings start on time and they end on time. Don't be that person who's rude that says, wait, just one more thing. No, I said I had to leave at the top of the hour. No, I got just one more thing. Well, we had an hour. You chose not to bring it up in that time. It must not be that important, right? And now you're making me late to my next thing. That's very selfish and very rude when you've agreed upon the rules. When you agreed upon it, it was a 15-minute meeting, 30-minute meeting, 1-hour meeting. Great, stick to the rules. If you need a follow-up meeting, then you book the follow-up meeting, but do not push people past that to make them late.
And so much of it goes back to being intentional. All right, Micah, what is the fourth thing that advisors need to stop doing in order to achieve top levels of success?
They need to stop looking for problems and start looking for the opportunities. Now, I'm not just saying that as a kind of a cheesy thing, right? But so often, and I'll pick on our BD fans that are out there saying, well, I can't do that because of compliance, or I can't do that because of this. If only, Jarvis, I could text my clients, I would be successful, right? If only I could do this email. Now I'm mocking that because I used to be in that camp, just to be clear. So I'm making fun of my past self when I used to do this, is I would blame compliance. I'd blame a third party as to why I wasn't successful. But then it'd be that weird dawning on moment, Jarvis, that I'd be sitting there looking at people on the same platform as me, the same compliance department as me, the same everything else as me, and they're a lot more successful than I am. So what are they doing that I was choosing not to do? And you know what it was? They stopped focusing on the problems and started looking for opportunities.
Yeah, and this could also be said, stop making excuses. And Micah, you and I like to joke about this. We run into this when we talk to advisors and they say, well, I can't do surge meetings because this one came out the other day. We do real estate planning with clients. We do real estate. What does that mean to you? In fact, this came up recently, right? And so we actually sat down and you drew out your estate planning process, and this other advisor who does real estate planning drew out his, and his process was impressive. It was missing several key steps. And so it's easy to fall into this victim mindset. And again, excuses and problems is a victim mindset of, oh, listen, hey, Matt and Micah can do surge because they're not really delivering value to clients. Matt and Micah can overcharge because they're not really, whatever. You can tell yourself these stories, or you can say, you know, if these guys can do it, I bet I can figure out a way to do it at least half as good as they can. And in fact, if you're smarter than us, great, do it twice as good. Amen. But make that an opportunity, not a threat, not an excuse.
I love it. So, Jarvis, what's the next thing advisors need to stop doing in order to be successful?
Yeah, the thing you need to stop doing, this is number 5. You need to stop, I'm going to call it going with the flow. So many advisors, their process just evolved by accident. There wasn't really any intentionality. Like, how do we do paperwork? Well, Betty takes care of it, and then Dave calls them, and then if we don't hear from them for a few weeks, then Larry looks at it. That's not a process, right? You need to stop just doing things by the seat of your pants, or doing things as they've always been done. We hear that one a lot. Well, that's just how we've always done it, or that's how we have to, quote unquote, do it. You need to stop doing that, and you've got to be intentional. You've got to step back and say, all right, we need to get these forms signed by clients. What would be the best way to do it? If we set aside all other constraints, what would that be? And work a process from there, not this, well, we've always done it this way.
And one of those things is, if you've always done it this way, that's not necessarily wrong. The real question is it serving you, and is it adding value, right? Because you know what? I've always put my pants on the same way. I've never felt the need to jump up in the air and put both legs in at the same time. Might have tried that as a kid, didn't work out too well, so I went back to the old process. So you don't have to change it just because. Jarvis, not picking on you, right? But just kind of pulling on that thread. It's a lot more about, is this process serving you, and is it doing the best job it can with intentionality? So here's a good example of that. Let's take a communication policy. We have an internal, external communication policy. External means how it works with clients. Internal's inside of the office. Now, why do we have an internal communication policy? Because as our team grows, our team members would bombard us with silly questions because we were the easy button. And one of the other things that would happen is, as we started having more and more client meetings, they felt our time was being more compressed. They wanted more time of it, more of our time. And so they would make up these things to want to talk about, et cetera. But then it wasn't organized, it wasn't productive. And then they would ask me questions in an environment that I wasn't able to answer them, right? I'm driving and they call me up, say, hey, I need to talk to you about your calendar next week. Can you look at these 2 appointments? No, I'm driving. It actually says on the calendar that I'm driving. How could I possibly do this? Right? So, but they would just feel that need to call. When we came up with a communication policy and stick to it, and we constantly have to bring this back up, it's not a one and done thing. This answers our team members' questions so much easier because they know when they can ask a question, they know how to escalate a question, and they know when they're going to get an answer to those questions. Now, if anytime someone violates that communication policy or any process, we got to hit a hard stop. And this happened the other day is we're kind of changing up some of our processes. And so something went down and a question came up and I was like, stop, pull up the process. And the team member was like, no, I know what it says. I said, great, then pull it up. And I had to say, pull up the process, Jarvis. No, I was counting them on my hands 5 times to get them to pull up the damn process because it was so ingrained of saying, I know what I'm doing. I said, stop, pull up the process. If you're asking me this question, this means we do not have it documented or you did not read the process. It's one of the two. And I'm not saying you didn't read it, but pull up the process and let's go through it. So we had to pull up the process and go through it. And sure enough, there was a gap in the process that we had to address in order to make sure this question could be answered because this was kind of a repeat thing. So, but we had to pull it up and I had to push back on the team. And even though I knew what the answer was when they called, I could not, in our meeting, I could not give them that answer. Pull up the process and go through it. Why? Because I want to teach them how to fish. I don't want to give them a fish. I want to teach them how to think through these processes and build them out so that later they're always growing and can develop these on their own.
Yeah, and if you're listening and you think, wow, that sounds like a real pain in the butt, why can't I just tell them the next step? If it sounds like, hey, these processes are hard to make, it is. These processes are hard to follow, they are. But again, that's what distinguishes top practices from everybody else. When an advisor says, hey, I'm at capacity because I have 30 clients, they'll show me your process book. Well, we don't really have any processes. And you can only handle 30 clients. That's such a shocker to me. My surge meeting is overwhelming. Cool, show me your process for surge. How are you scheduling the meetings? How are you doing prep? Oh, well, we just kind of do whatever. Oh, well, it's no big surprise to me then. No big surprise to me.
Another one I want to throw on these processes too, money movement, scheduling appointments, all of these things are processes. Now, the benefit, I think, of the process, Jarvis, on these is not just the internal side, it's the external communication. Like when we have a client meeting, I tell clients it will be done Wednesday of next week. Regardless of what day I'm having the meeting, Monday through Friday, Wednesday of next week is when this is going to be complete because I can be very consistent in my meetings. My team knows when that deadline is, and I've always set that expectation with the client. Now, the same thing when a client calls in and wants money, right? We have a process of what our team is going to say when that money is available, right? They know how to check to see if it's an excess distribution. They know what tax rate that we need to withhold because these are all preset in our policy. It's not giving advice. They're just following what we have preset that's there. And they know if then that. If a client calls in and needs money, and let's say we have the money set aside, great. It'll be 3 days before it gets to you. That means it's a Thursday. So you're not going to get the money until maybe Wednesday of next week. Is that going to be okay with you? No, actually, my son's closing on the house. We need the money on Monday. Boy, I'm sure glad we brought that up, that it's going to take several days to get to it, because otherwise we just would have done an ACH. The money would have been there maybe on Tuesday, right? But now the client would have been mad because it wasn't there on Monday. So these communication policies, or all policies, are really good to communicate expectations with clients and set those in advance so you know if you can meet them or not.
Want to highlight here, we've talked a lot about processes that teams need to follow, right? But it's equal, and the cashiering one is a classic example, right? Hey, this is the expectation. Is that okay with you? But as advisors, we have to be following that process, right? Not only as these other stops, stop being late. Obviously, we have to be on time for things. But when we walk into a team meeting, hey, we have to follow the process. Even when I sit down with a prospect or with a client, I have to follow my process, right? First couple of minutes, boy, Bob and Sue, how are you doing? How's the family? How's life? Hey, listen, I have several things I want to look at together, but before we start on any of those, please tell me what questions and concerns you have, right? That's my process that I have to follow. And when I think, you know what, I've seen Bob and Sue enough times, I don't need to ask about their grandkids, and I don't need to ask if they have questions, that's me abandoning the process, and my results will suffer every single time.
Amen.
All right, Micah, number 6. What is the 6th thing that advisors need to stop doing if they want to get to top levels of value, top levels of success?
All right, so Jarvis, we got to this point, and the reality is most people can do these top 5 things that we had talked about. They're a little challenging.
Sure.
They're not overly the top challenging. Here is the one that's really going to set you aside, and here's the one that you don't want to do. And why do I know you don't want to do it? Because I don't want to do it. Jarvis doesn't want to do it. No one wants to do this in our team. But this is what's going to set you aside. It's very simple. Stop practicing in front of prospects and clients. What does that mean? How often do you walk into a prospect and client meeting? Don't say you never do it because you lie about other things too. How often do you walk into a client meeting and you haven't really practiced what your script's going to be? Maybe it's the buckets presentation. Maybe it's a retirement income timeline. Maybe it's your cash flow conversation. Maybe it's those first couple questions you ask in the meeting, the chit chat. You haven't really practiced that now out loud, not just thought about it and wrote an agenda, actually sat down and practiced this and done some role playing with it. If you have not done role playing, then you are practicing in front of your clients. That's exactly what this means. Now, some people are so good because they've been doing this for 40 years that they know it's ingrained in their system that they need to role play less, not never, less when it comes into it. Then there's people that are newer inside of this, or you know what, Jarvis, when I'm learning something new, like at a value add, and I'm going to deliver it to a first time for a client, we role play and practice this a bunch because I don't like to be embarrassed in front of my clients. I don't like to be embarrassed, period, much less in front of clients. So I am going to practice that with the team. We're going to practice that together and really iron out what this should be.
Mike, it took me a long time to believe this one early in my career, right? Because this isn't new adage, right? That you should practice, right? Athletes practice, warriors practice, performers practice, everyone that's good at their profession practices, right? But early in my career, I don't need to practice. That's kind of silly. At this point, Micah, when I'm getting ready, when I'm doing a presentation, so I get paid to speak all around the world now. Heading to London in October to speak for the CISI group. Really excited to go see financial planners on the other side of the pond. When I'm driving down the road in my car by myself, I turn off my audiobook and I present the entire thing. Like, here I am driving, and I hope people seeing me just think I'm listening to an audiobook or singing along with the radio, but I'm giving my entire presentation, and then I'm making little notes along the way about, oh, you know what, that didn't sound quite right. The timing of that joke wasn't quite right. You know, I could have articulated that more clearly. I caught myself saying, well, you know, it's like the best people practice. And when I think, if you ever go to like practices, right, whether it's for a theater group or professional sports, their practice is harder than any of us can handle. Never mind the real game.
Yeah.
Right. So you say, well, I can't, somebody says to me, hey, how do I make as much money as Micah makes? Work as hard as Micah does. If your practice was 1/2 as hard as Micah's, you could outrun him. Well, you probably couldn't because he wouldn't see you coming and he would run faster. But you just have to practice harder than everybody else, right? It's easy to say, hey, professional athletes are overpaid. Cool. You practice as hard as that guy or gal and then go down and audition for the job.
And one of the things with practice is, and our team has been doing this more and more, and I guess our team is coming to the point where they like it. It's still uncomfortable to practice, but our team's to the point where like, hey, we've seen the benefits of practicing so much. This is why it's important to do, and they're starting to do it together, which is great. But our other advisors, they practice together, which is great. And then they turn the recorder on, they turn the loom on, they record or QuickTime, whatever, and record the entire session. And Jarvis, just like so many other things, it's different when that red light comes on. And that's as close as I know how to do to simulate in a client meeting without actually being in a client meeting is turning a recording on, a video recording of yourself, and have you explaining it to someone else. I don't know if you have a better way of doing it, but that's the best way to create the pressure, so to speak, of explaining it.
The only other one I've seen, I'm going to present this one with caution because I've not tried it. I knew an advisor that would buy garbage leads. Just these lead services are all garbage, right? And he would buy these garbage leads, and they're all garbage, just so his new advisors could practice on those. So he had no delusions that these were going to turn into anything. He just wanted them to have practice reps on leads that he wasn't that interested in. Now, again, I have not done that myself, but otherwise, I'm a little iffy about the whole thing. But the record light, you're right. As soon as that record light comes on, even you and I, Micah, we've done hundreds of these episodes now. And I noticed that as soon as we hit record, our demeanor changes just ever so slightly, that record light is on. It's a whole different angle. So yeah, you've got to practice it. Practice it on Loom or QuickTime or whatever. Watch it. If you really want to take it to the next level, have someone else watch it. Exchange your videos. That will make you a top tier advisor, not just financial success, but the value you're able to deliver to clients when you're able to communicate more effectively is astronomical.
A pro tip on this one,
Please,
this is going to
Micah.
lead to our next one as well. When you exchange it, only people that can critique a video or give suggestions on it is someone that's actually doing this. Right. So in our office, we have a great team that's there. And sometimes we'll bring the team together and we'll present the presentation in front of the audience. And we always tell the audience, our team members, you don't get to critique their presentation skill, but you get to critique, did they address your questions? Did they address your concerns? You get to ask these things, right? So we like to set those rules up in place. It's okay. Advisors, you will be presenting. You get to critique the presentation because you should be seeing things that the audience isn't seeing. Right. And so we really like to set those rules up to get it from success, because what we don't want to happen, Jarvis, we don't want number 7 to happen in our office. So what's number 7?
Yes. Number 7 is stop listening to, I'm going to put this in heavy air quotes, stop listening to experts, right? And this, Micah, goes to your point. If this isn't the person who's going to be in the arena, I don't want to hear from, because and again, these are nice people and they mean well, and they're trying to help the industry and they're trying to do good things. Like, I really believe in their heart of hearts, they believe what they're saying, but they are not adding value to your situation. If you're not looking a client in the eyes, if you're not looking a prospect in the eyes, if you're not facing that kind of rejection, you cannot give good feedback to the rest of us who are. You just can't, right? I can't go to war and ask somebody who sat on the sidelines, hey, how do I shoot this gun? And when someone's shooting back at me, like, that's not a conversation we can have. Do not get feedback from people who aren't doing it. And ideally from people who aren't doing it at some level that's multiples of yours.
Yeah. So, mad props to a Christian in our office. He's doing more presentations. He's really doing a great job, especially working with our federal community. I'm just loving it.
Phenomenal.
And
yeah.
So when he was coming up for this last seminar that we did with a bunch of prospects, he was practicing. We brought the group together, and he had read somewhere online, I'm not sure where it came from, but when someone asks a question, that you should walk towards that person. To kind of close the space and kind of chat with them a little bit, which in the setting, concept is fine. But when he read that, so when we were role playing, Jarvis, I was sitting in a chair. He walked from the seat all the way up to me and squared up with me while I'm down in the chair. And he was like, 18 inches away from me, feet to feet while I'm sitting in the chair. And if you can't picture that, you probably haven't been in this case. But I said, okay, so we got done with this presentation and I had Christian sit down. I said, I want to do the same thing to you that you did to me. And he asked a question, and I walked right up on him the same way. And he was super uncomfortable. He was wanting to scoot back. I was like, what do you feel? And I kept chasing him down. He's like, I feel like you want to fight me. I was like, yes, you're squaring up to me. And he was like, yeah, but I heard it was good to close the gap. I said, yeah, close the gap, but don't get in their space, right?
Yeah.
And so this is the difference in reading something and then applying it in real life. Reading about Kung Fu versus getting punched in the face, right? You can talk about how it feels when you get hit, but then you get punched in the face, and it's a little bit different in how you need to react to it. That's the same thing here, but this is why role-playing is so important. And again, kudos to Christian for going through the work to do this, because then he didn't make that mistake in the presentation. Because when we were actually in front of prospects, he had already done that with us. He had already flushed out a bunch of things. He did a much better job presenting in front of people because he had that experience. Had he had not, he could have made a pretty big mistake in front of clients.
Yeah, boy, quick to tie a loop on that one. I don't want to get too carried away on this one. The concept, and this is where the experts go wrong, concept of spot on, right? NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, mirroring body language. We're huge advocates of turning towards that audience member, maybe taking a partial step in their direction with an open body stance. All powerful techniques, right? Whatever hand expression, mirroring that. But yeah, I could just see that. And Christian's, he's in great shape. Props to Christian, really takes his fitness. Yeah. Well, if Christian squared up to me, I would be intimidated. I'd be like, fight or flight would be stepping in.
Right.
And it would also depend, we can go all the way down this. It would depend on your stature, right? If you're someone who's of large physical stature, a man of kind of an alpha dominance, you've got to be more careful than that. If you're a smaller person, smaller statue, less of a masculine energy, it's a different dynamic. But yeah, mad props, Micah, to you and Christian for practicing that ahead of time. And props to him for trying something new in a setting where that's okay to do.
Amen. That's where the mad props are, right? This isn't a thing saying he made a mistake. Hey, I've made so many more mistakes than him, right? That's not the issue with this. This is mad props to him for taking the time to role play, to be uncomfortable, because boy, in front of a group of all of us drilling him with questions, trying to make this very uncomfortable for him so he gets used to it. Our goal was sometimes with these practices, and we let you know in advance on the role playing, is the aspect to say, we're going to make this we're going to take every bad experience we've ever had and we're going to put it in one meeting. Because I don't want this to be the first time you get punched in the face. I want you to hear these things, and now you have nothing to worry about, because more than likely these things won't happen. And so those are the things that we want to practice again and again and again, so we get used to getting hit, so to speak, and we don't get caught flat on our feet, that we're able to move, we're able to pivot, and we don't get offended by these questions. Sometimes in our insecurities can really come in, and this is where role-playing it can come out, is that we're insecure in something, somebody pushes back, and we get defensive about it. You know what? Clients and prospects can push back on any single thing that they want. It's their money. It's their entire life savings. I encourage them to push back. And I always say, hey, here's a red flag. If you ever work with an advisor, if they get offended by you asking a question, it's time for you to leave.
Yes.
That is a red flag for clients right there. So it's the same with me. If I ever get offended by your questions, right? Not if I'm thinking about it, but if I get offended by your questions, I was like, that's a sign that you should leave, because I should never be offended by you wanting to make sure you guys are taken care of.
Well, I love that. Hey, one last thing on this, not asking the experts, something I used to do. So sometimes what I ran into, and for a lot of our solo advisors, younger advisors, that say, hey, I don't have anyone to role play this with. I don't have anyone to practice this with. Well, I would say right away, join the Invictus coaching program, because that creates a platform for that. The process, though, still stands the same. Record it and watch it back through with the lens of whoever you would want to do that.
Yes.
So if you say, you know what I would love to do, Micah does a lot of presentations. I would love for Micah to review this, but if you just send him this message cold, it's not going to work. What do I think Micah would say about this, right? What do I think Nick Murray, that's what I would say. What do you think Nick Murray would say about this? What would Tom Gow say about this presentation? And I would try to reflect back on that. Again, as I'm watching the recording, I would step into that third person role and say, all right, if I was Tom Gow, if I was Micah Shalansky, if I was Floyd, if I was whoever, I'm watching this, what would they say back to me? Not going to be 100% accurate, might only be 50% accurate, but it's still going to help me see that from a different lens.
I love it. Well, Jarvis, just like normal, when we get into this podcast, we're 10 minutes into it. I'm like, holy crap, we have nothing to talk about. And then all of a sudden the podcast is full and I have other stuff I want to bring up, but we're going to have to wait till next time. So this podcast is all about action items. So Jarvis, what action item should our listeners take this week?
Yeah, I'm going to say that the action item for this week is pick one of these 7 things. You can go back and look at the show notes, look at the transcript. Pick one of these things to stop doing. And the best way to stop doing it, put a Post-it note on your computer, change the lock screen of your phone, put it next to the speedometer in your car that, hey, what am I going to stop doing? But also have the positive thing there, right? So if you say, I'm going to stop having alerts, and on the other half, I'm going to say, I'm going to start being intentional, because I want to have both sides of that action item.
I love it. Number 2, I'm going to say action item. Who is your mentor, right? Now, maybe this is someone in reach. Maybe this is someone out of your reach that's there. But who is that mentor that you can then have the internal lens of saying, what would Tom Gow do? What would Dan Sullivan do? What would Nick Murray do, right? What would Matthew Jarvis? Oh, I don't know if I do it, Matt. No, just kidding. But what would Jarvis do in these things, right? So these are the questions that you got to be able to ask yourself to help improve.
Last action I would say, Micah, and again, the advisors who hit the top level of success do the things that everyone else is unwilling to do. And I hated that cliche my early part of my career. They say, oh, well, the successful people do what everyone else is unwilling to do. It is the absolute truth. The people I see crush it belong to coaching programs that are coached by people who have successful practices. Yes, this is a shameless plug. Email lifestyle@theperfectria.com. Get connected with Tracy, who can talk to you more about this, about how you can get coached by advisors like ourselves who are delivering at top levels and aren't saying what we think you should do, but literally what you should do, or Micah, in the case of this episode, what you should stop doing.
Amen. Guys, as always, it is a pleasure to be here. We love transforming the industry and getting this message out. And until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice.